You're listening to Girls with Grafts, a burn community podcast created by Phoenix Society for Burn Survivors, a leading nonprofit dedicated to supporting the burn community. In this podcast, we'll talk with burn survivors, share resources to help with supporting and improving burn recovery, and discuss how to prevent burn injuries. Here are your hosts, burn survivors and Phoenix Society's marketing team, Amber Wilcox and Rachel Kudlak.
Hello and welcome back to Girls with Grafts. I am Rachel Kudlak. I'm one of the hosts of the podcast, and I am joined by my lovely co-host, Amber Wilcox.
Hey there, how's it going?
It is going well. I am excited for today's podcast per usual, but it's
Me
another
too.
one where we have two guests, so I always love when we have many voices and faces on Girls with Grafts.
Awesome. Well, with that said, I'm going to let you kick it off with our sponsor for today's podcast. So want to give a quick shout out. Go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, we definitely want to give a shout out to our Phoenix partner, Exerco Medical. Exerco engineers high precision products for both the healthcare and tissue bank professionals and are dedicated to advancing the healing power of skin to patients who need it most. So you can learn more about Exerco Medical by visiting their website, which we will have linked in the show's description.
Awesome. Yes, a special thanks to them for sure.
Yes. And without further ado, we have a sister duo on today's podcast. So I'm so excited to welcome Alexa and Jacqueline Child to the show today. Alexa, who is one of the co-founders of Dateability, graduated from Georgetown Law in 2015 and currently works as a public interest attorney. Through witnessing her sister's experience with disability, Alexa has become an advocate and ally for the disability community. She's passionate about social justice, enjoys TV and film, and loves all things Halloween. And then we also have Jacqueline with us today, who is the other co-founder of Dateability, who has turned her experience with disability and chronic illness into a new venture. She created Dateability with her sister after years of discouraging ableist experiences on the mainstream dating apps. When she isn't managing her health, Jacqueline enjoys playing the guitar, reading, and volunteering at the local animal shelter. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Well, as Rachel shared, you two are the co-founders of an app called Dateability. Can you tell us a little bit more about the app? I'm assuming I can download it on like my iPhone or something, but you want to just share us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so Dateability is really the only dating app for the disabled and chronically ill communities. And yeah, we want it to be a modern dating experience. And so it's available on iPhones and Androids, and you can download that at the App Store or Google Play Store. And it's also available on web apps, so people can use their browsers and go to dateabilityapp.com and access it from there, because we really want to make sure that Dateability is accessible for everyone who wants to use it.
That is awesome. And I know our community will definitely love the app and love, how there's a niche app for those with disabilities and chronic illnesses. But can you tell us a little bit more about how you came up with the idea for the dating app and just kind of how it all got started?
Yeah, so it started a few years ago when I graduated college, and I entered into the dating world and really started to use dating apps. And I would go on the mainstream dating apps, and I would just start to have these really bad experiences whenever I had to disclose my disabilities. And I became disabled due to chronic illness as a teenager. And it really changed my whole perspective of life. And I always felt like I couldn't relate to anyone on the dating apps. People were, really focusing on different things than me. And I really was looking for someone who aligned with my values and who didn't take life for granted. And I would run into these people who would just say like the most offensive things to me, like that I shouldn't ever have biological kids because I could risk passing down my genetics, and that it was too much of a burden or that it was too stressful to date someone like me. And so time and time again, I would like go off the dating apps for a while, and then I would get the courage to go back on, and this would happen all over again. And then in October of 2021, I had to make the decision to get a feeding tube due to gastroparesis. And I really panicked, and I didn't know what my life would look like. I didn't know how socializing would look like. And I remember talking to Alexa about it and saying, I just wish there was a dating app for people like me. And she said, how about we do it? How about we make it? And, that's what we did. We started it.
So I know you shared a little bit, Jacqueline, about your chronic illness, but do you want to share a little bit more about your experience with your illness and how you're doing today?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with dysautonomia, Ehlers-Danlos, and gastroparesis back in 2010. And my health was, for the most part, pretty stable until around college, and it really just took a downhill turn. And then after graduating college, I was diagnosed with lupus and rheumatoid arthritis, and my gastroparesis got very severe. And so all in all, I've had over 40 surgeries and trying to manage my symptoms. Being a chronically ill person is really a full-time job. And I'm doing okay. I'm stable, and I'm getting to a place where I feel okay in the body I'm in. My symptoms haven't improved, but I'm learning to live with it.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing all of that with us too.
Yeah.
So going back to dating a little bit, one thing that for burn survivors, they will face on dating apps is if their burns and scars aren't visible, when to disclose that information. So were you struggling when you were dating and, you mentioned that folks were saying rude and just mean things? Was that happening on the apps? Was that when you got in person? Or can you just share a little bit more about that with us?
Yeah, it was pretty much all the time. I tried it both ways because I don't have any really visible disabilities. And so I relate to that. It's like everything is hidden. All my scars can be hidden by clothes. And I would toy around with, do I just go right off the bat, tell them I have a chronic illness? And then people would tell me horrible things. And then sometimes I would wait until it was absolutely necessary. Like they were suggesting some outrageous activity that I couldn't do, and I would still be rejected. And so it was really hard to figure out when was the right time. I think it's totally person by person, but my gut, it always says when I feel comfortable with the person, that's when I can disclose, because I shouldn't feel like I am hiding if I don't say anything. It's personal.
And Alexa, I would love to hear from you on, how were you feeling seeing your sister go through these struggles, and what was that like for you?
Yeah, super frustrating. I mean, she's such a wonderful person. Her disabilities and chronic illnesses and her experiences have definitely shaped who she is, and I think for the better. There's a lot of people I've met in my life who crumble at the smallest obstacle, and I think that Jacqueline is not like that. And it's a really good quality to have, because ultimately, no matter what, eventually life is going to throw some crap your way. And so how you handle it is really important, and Jacqueline can take it all. And I think that that's really important, but it doesn't define her. And we live together, and we have a very full relationship, and it's fulfilling. And there's, of course, things that she can't do that I can do, and I do on my own, or do with friends, but that's never, affected my happiness or our relationship. So I never understood why all of these people were looking at something through a vacuum or being so short-sighted. I also thought, ultimately, eventually, the majority of us are going to age into disability at some point. It's going to happen. Our dad one day woke up when he was in his 40s and couldn't walk anymore. He had severe rheumatoid arthritis. It just one day he went to bed, everything was normal, woke up the next day and could not walk. And he's never been the same since. And he was, perfectly healthy the first 40 years of his life. And so that can happen. And so in a way, I mean, I always take the attitude of good riddance. These are the people who will not stick with you if something, happens or shit hits the fan. And eventually a lot of people do face hardship, whether it's with their health or anything else. But at the same time, she's so deserving and worthy of love. And I know that she, wants to get married and maybe have children and have a family and whatever that may look like or whatever form that takes. And to not have that and to be rejected and to be made to feel unworthy or undeserving of love was very frustrating.
I can imagine. I know after, my burn injury, while it's not the same as dating, right? I was married at the time, but you learn who your friends are too, right? Of who's willing to sacrifice what you can and can't do for your own health. So I think that's really an important message to put across, because it's unfortunate that those things do have to happen and people can not be very nice, but it's not just with dating, it can be with friendships as well.
Oh yeah. We've learned that through the pandemic, we're really, really safe even still. And there are friends who will make me, because they all understand Jacqueline, but they don't understand why I am still so safe. And there are friends who never give me grief about it and don't ever make me feel guilty. And there are friends who do make me feel like I should feel bad for asking them to take an extra step or to dine outdoors. And you definitely it's unfortunate, but it's left me looking at people differently. But we do the friend thing is something real, and Jacqueline's experienced it. And eventually, sooner rather than later, we want to implement a friendship version of Dateability on the app, because personally, I think that both platonic and romantic relationships are just as important, and they bring so much value to people's lives. And having that shared perspective and experience, even if you don't have the same disability, just understanding what the other person might be going through, because maybe you have walked a few feet in their shoes in a little bit. I think that that's really important. So that's good you brought that up.
Important. Yeah, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about the app. It's currently strictly for dating, but is there a way to kind of, do you have to necessarily have a mental disability or chronic illness to join the app, or is it specific? What does it look like in terms of how it segments?
Yeah, anyone can join. Of course, we made this app for people with all disabilities, physical, psychiatric, intellectual, and chronic illness. And then, of course, we want non-disabled people to join, because we know that people are out there. There's a lot of people on the app, like my sister, who are familiar with chronic illness, like their parent has one or a friend, or they work in an advocacy organization. And we really wanted to just be inclusive. But it's been a really nice place to just foster this understanding and the shared experience. On the app, we have a section called Dateability Deets, and it appears on every profile. And it's an extensive list of just some broad terms like immunocompromised or wheelchair user, mobility aid. And you can just select those. And there's no diagnoses, because we really want to respect privacy, but you can add those if you want. But it's just a great way to just neutralize whatever the situation is, normalize it, destigmatize it. And it's a great conversation starter also.
And it's open to anyone in the United States, correct? Currently?
We're currently available in the United States and Canada and Mexico, and it's completely free. So we really want people to just join the community. There's nothing to lose. We're not asking for any money, and just become a part of the community.
Mm-hmm. Can you see if I'm in Florida, right? And you can find people in your area. Is that correct?
Yeah. So right now our location function's turned off. We launched 5 months ago. We have over 4,000 users, but 4,000 is a lot. But at the same time, when you narrow it down by gender and sexuality, yeah, you don't have as many options as you might on the other apps. Eventually we will get there, but it takes time. And we didn't want someone logging on and not seeing anybody in their area. It's just not a good user experience. And we also know that a lot of times virtual companionship and virtual relationships, are just as fulfilling. I went to law school and college out east, miles away. So none of my friends live in Denver. And so I have friends all over the country, and we primarily communicate through technology. And then at the same time, like, long distance relationships can form, and then one person can move. I'm always joking, I need to import my person from another happen. So right now you'll see everyone that matches your age and gender, sexuality preferences. Eventually, when we do have this network effect and we have a ton of users on there, then we will turn that location function on. But right now we think that we really just want to build this community, and that can be virtual, especially because the pandemic is so many of our users, that it's safer, to FaceTime and have a FaceTime.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we had Dan and Nazia on earlier in the season, and he was from Canada and she was from Greece, and ended up moving to Canada, and they're madly in love and married. So yeah, that's one of the positives that came out of the pandemic for sure, is just the increased use of technology.
Virtual.
And we're breaking down barriers. You don't have to be in the same city. And like you said, way safer to have a FaceTime date, at least initially, than meeting up with someone.
And I think that's how they got together too, is Dan and Nasia just started like a Facebook Messenger relationship, I think they said, and continued that way. So that, it's great that it's turned off so that, you don't feel excluded from that.
Yeah.
So can you just walk us through a little bit more of the process of signing up? I know you said you can download it on the App Store and Android or even online, which I love too. But can you just, tell us, what kind of information is required? What information can you add if you would like to, or what that process is like?
Yeah. So you'll sign up, verify who you are through your email. You'll get a code sent to your email. And then you upload at least 4 pictures, maximum 6. And, we would recommend that the pictures are, some of you alone, some of you with friends, doing stuff, whatever, it's up to the person. You enter in your height, your gender, your pronouns, your vaccination status, and your school location. These can be made private. There's an option for that under the settings. You still have to fill them out, but then you don't have to show them to other users. The Dateability deets is optional. We want to respect boundaries. And so if you don't want to put, what you're dealing with or what your situation is, that's totally fine. I think almost all of our users have selected the Dateability deets just because they feel seen. And it's like, oh, hey, we see you and we aren't judging you or shaming you or anything. And so it's been great, but it is optional. And there's a bio, and then we have a character limit to the bio, of course. We just, something fun, leave some mystery for the conversations. And then once you're done making your profile, you can go to the age, right? Essentially set your age range and then start swiping. And the only way you can message somebody is if you match with them, just like the other app. So they have to like you back, and then you can start messaging. The important thing, and what I think is different for our app, and I actually don't really know if the other apps do this, but our onboarding tutorial shows how the app works, but we also have safety resources. We think safety is really important, especially with this community. Unfortunately, people think that the disabled community is, more vulnerable, or they view them as vulnerable, even if they're not. And so we really want to educate our users and keep them safe. And so there's a safety tutorial, what not to do, never give out, too much personal information. And those resources and tips are all, can reference back to them. They're all in the app under the settings, which is really nice. And we are constantly trying to emphasize the importance of staying safe.
Yeah, that's definitely important, especially online. And, you never know who you're talking to behind the phone. So love that that's a priority for you.
Can you tell me a little bit more? So it sounds like you guys are on the app as well, correct?
Yeah.
Have you matched with anyone? If that's okay for me to ask, are you using the app currently? Or do you have any success stories of folks that have used your app and have met someone?
Yeah, we're both on the app, and it's really funny because we get this question a lot, and I'm like, wow, I'm too busy to actually, and so I need to grow Dateability, and then I'll be like, okay, I can use this for real. But yeah, I mean, it's really cool to see other people using it, and you know, I match with them and we exchange a few words, and it's really awesome to see the community growing. And we have heard of a few success stories, and which is very incredible for such a new app, because think about me being on like the mainstream dating apps for 5+ years and I never found anyone. And so the fact that people are actually starting relationships from Dateability is really exciting. And you know, I think at this point over 15,000 messages have been exchanged all over the app. And so people are really using it and really enjoying it. I think, you know, having a chronic illness or disability can feel really isolating, and just having this safe space where people understand you and you can just like be yourself is really comforting.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I loved, you mentioned earlier about maybe a next phase is to kind of have that friendship part of it. And I just can see that taking off, because even just you match with someone and maybe you are just better friends, but to have those commonalities that you can bond over, like you said, it's a great conversation starter. I just can see that being a really, really awesome avenue for the app to go in.
Yeah, we're hoping that we're able to implement that this summer. You know, when we started this, we were thinking of it just strictly as a dating app. And then we started talking to people who are in relationships. One is just either they're injury able, one's disabled, or they both are. But either way, every time we talked to somebody, there was this common theme of like, you know, I totally understand because I don't have a ton of platonic friends. I became disabled after I got married in my 40s. And a lot of my platonic friends just kind of, you know, suffered as a result because we couldn't do the same activities we used to do, or they just didn't understand what I was going through. And we kept hearing that. We've also noticed that we have a pretty large female following. All the other dating apps have this issue where there's more men than women on the apps. And so they like Match.com doesn't charge like women to join because there's just so many men and not enough women. And we actually have the opposite issue. We have more women than men. So for any men who are listening, please sign up. But also it'll be great. The friendship will be really great for the female community, of course, male too. But because we have such a strong female presence, like that, it'll really make waves there too.
Yeah, I can totally see that. But yeah, that sounds like an awesome next step, and a natural next step for the app too.
For sure.
So I want to kind of dive back into dating a little bit. And, you know, Jacqueline, you shared how you maybe took some time off from dating because you were just getting, you know, mean and hurtful responses. How did you get back into dating, or what advice would you give to, you know, a survivor who's listening who did, you know, maybe has had a few bad dating experiences and it's just like, I'm done with this. I'm over it.
Yeah, it can be really hard to just get back into it after discouraging or bad experiences. But I always think like you have to put yourself out there. You know, we can't get an Amazon delivery of the perfect partner, which, yeah, I wish we could.
It's a bummer, right?
I think dating apps are kind of like the closest thing to that. But I truly think that there is a person for everyone, really multiple perfect people for everyone. And I just think that you just have to put yourself out there and realize that I internalized a lot of the negative stuff that I was hearing from the dating apps, and I was made to feel like I was unworthy or that I actually was a burden to date. And just through therapy and through talking with friends and family, I realized that it's not about me. It says a lot more about the other person if they can't accept me for who I am.
Now, Alexa, so you talk a little bit too about how you created the app, right, for your sister as well, or together per se. What was that process like to just kind of say, we're going to do this and go in and decide to create an app?
Yeah. I'm an attorney, so I'm a problem solver and a problem creator, but a problem solver by nature. Like I really like fixing things. And so I did panic for Jacqueline when she had to get her feeding tube and thought about like how it would affect our relationship because we, you know, typically I'll cook for her. and I, or would there be guilt if I was eating in front of her because we live together, so I have to eat and stuff like that. And so I was thinking like, this is going to be really hard to date. And I've already known what she's faced. So I just don't know how people are going to understand. It's wrong for them to not understand, but that's just the reality, and I'm not going to change other people's behaviors. We can do that. The disabled community can do that with allies and try to make progress like we have with so many other marginalized populations. But like, that's not up to just us to fix. And that's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time, but we can change the social experiences of this community by creating this safe space. So when we decided to do that, I went to Office Depot, got a notebook, pens, went to the hospital where she was recovering and sat with her. And we literally drew a roadmap of what we wanted the app to look like. And then started looking for developers. Neither of us code or have tech experience. And we found a great team actually locally, and they brought our vision to life. I mean, we had designed everything. Jacqueline designed the logos. She has some graphic design experience. And it was a long process, but the real work for us started after we launched. Now we just grind all the time looking for investors, podcasts, trying to market, just customer service. We wear all of the hats. We are starting to expand a little bit so we don't have to do everything or more fill in the gaps. What we just can't do because we don't have the experience. But yeah, we're doing everything. I'll be up at like 3 a.m. responding to customer service emails. It's been, the world of entrepreneurship is crazy. I think I underestimated what every startup founder has ever gone through. I have a lot of respect for everybody now because it's a wild ride, but we're learning so much. And the other day we were on a walk and I was like, so that startup founders, they often create multiple startups. And I was like, what would our next startup be? Off and is in a solid place and we can go on to the next venture. So I'm already thinking like 20 steps ahead.
Jacqueline's like, let's calm down. I can't.
I'm out of ideas. This is it.
Well, that's
sort of record label.
Yes. But that didn't involve you.
No.
That's awesome. So what has it been like working together as sisters and kind of building this? Has that been, what are the pros and cons of going into business with your sister?
Yeah, it's been really good, honestly. Mm-hmm. And it's really nice that, we live together. So it's like, if, I have one quick question, it can be done in 30 seconds. Or if we need to practice something, we can get that done. We really haven't had any big blow up fights. And if we have a little disagreement, it ends in about 2 minutes.
One of us gives in.
Yes, one of us gives in. But it's been really great because we're both so comfortable with each other. So we can be completely honest. We can tell the other person that, oh, you're annoying me. Let's just like table this for now. I don't want to talk about it. And then it's really nice because Alexa does understand my limitations. Running a business with a chronic illness, it's really tiring and it's really hard. And so there are days where I just can't get what I need to done. So Alexa's understanding. He's like, okay, it's totally fine if you have to take the day and just relax or take a couple hour nap. It's nice to have someone who gets it.
Mm-hmm. And I guess sometimes you'll be like on the computer for like 5 hours straight, and I'm like, you need to stop. Like you're playing a long game here, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. So just stop. Like you don't need to be on for 5 hours. Because if you overpush yourself, then tomorrow's a waste. You're not going to be able to do anything. And so because I'm comfortable, I think if it was like a friend or a stranger that you founded this with, they would never be able to tell you that. But because I'm your older sister, I just bully you into it.
Yes.
I love
And you're
that.
both in Colorado, correct?
Yeah, we're in Denver.
So does the Denver community, do you find that you have a large base of the Denver community because you are very well connected in that area, or?
I definitely see people from Colorado and from the area. And I think there's a couple reasons. One, because we're based here. So yes, people have heard of us here, but also the Colorado community is very, very active and places a lot of emphasis on living an active lifestyle. And if you don't do that, you know, you're taking up space. And I found that a lot when dating. It was like the first couple questions were like, oh, do you hike? Do you rock climb? Do you do this? And I felt embarrassed to say, no, I don't, or no, I can't. And I think a lot of people do see that who are chronically ill. They see that like Colorado is inaccessible in a lot of places, like even the small mountain towns. Like there's like something as simple as their sidewalks being horrible is just really eye-opening, and people can really relate to it. The fact that Colorado people are like adventure nuts.
Yeah, we have the highest life expectancy, but with that like comes this other side where everyone places this emphasis on like health and needing, they will literally write like looking for a partner who is healthy or looking for a partner who cares about their health. And it's really like bizarre to me. I've never seen that anywhere else. I also haven't been on the dating apps in any other city, but I think that's like especially true here.
Yeah, I think there's something too, right? Like where you live can be also affecting of like your dating, right, life of what you're doing in that area and whatnot. So I'm sure it adds that extra level of challenge when you're dating in a place where everyone is super active and you have your limitations, especially with things like hiking and rock climbing. That's not just a gentle sport, right?
Definitely. So if we have, let's just say, a listener who, downloads the app, doesn't have, a disability or a chronic illness, but doesn't care if their partner does, what advice, I guess, would you maybe give them on, I sometimes fall into this of I'm not always sure what to say or how to ask, or is that something I shouldn't be doing and let the other person bring that information to me?
Yeah, I mean, you could answer as someone who doesn't have a disability.
Actually, there was this Washington Post quiz, like, are you ableist or how ableist are you? It came out last week. I was looking at the questions, and one was like, if you see someone who's blind at a crosswalk and it's not an audible pedestrian, like where it beeps to let you know, what do you do? And I gave you a bunch of options. And one was like, you take them by the hand and like start leading them off. The other option was you ask them if they'd like help crossing the street. And that was actually the correct answer. So I think, there's like a delicate balance of trying to coddle and then infantilize a person and be like, oh my God, let me take care of you, versus just being like, hey, I see you and I'm like, I'm here. And if you need anything, let me know, please. Like, don't hesitate to ask. I know, Jacqueline, like we were talking about this the other day too, actually. You were seeing a guy who never once asked you a single question about your disability or chronic illness, and you didn't like that. Mm-hmm. Then there are people who ask you like super invasive questions, but I think ignoring it too is kind of
makes you upset. Yeah. I know it would make me upset. So
talk about like what it's like on the receiving end.
I think asking questions is okay. I think there's a lot of people who might feel the same way as me. Like, it's okay if you ask a question. I mean, I think most people know if it's offensive or not, and the intention definitely matters. But I enjoy people asking about it and wanting to learn more. I mean, if it's like you're asking because you're really nosy and you are going to use it against me, that's one thing. But if you genuinely care, like, feel free to ask away. And and I think it's also for non-disabled people, like if someone does say that something is offensive, you have to believe them, and you have to, and just because you didn't intend it that way still doesn't make it not offensive if someone's offended by it.
Yeah, I think we get that a lot, even just in the burn survivor community, of like, maybe you didn't mean for that to be offensive, but it felt that way to me, or you said something, or maybe even didn't say something and just stared at me that made me feel uncomfortable, even though so I think it's important to recognize, as somebody who, right, like deals with these things, that like they're not gonna always say the right thing, but I think it's like how your willingness or that person's willingness to accept the fact that, like you said, you're going to maybe say something uncomfortable or out of line, but I will let you know when that, right. Or being willing to let you know when that happens.
Yeah, exactly. Jacqueline has a large scar on her chest. And just the comments she gets from doctors or nurses when they see it, like, oh my God. And it's like, I always tell her to mess with them and be like, wait, what? Like, oh my God, I have it, because it's like, obviously, like, I know I have a scar and stuff like that, instead somebody could say, oh, like, what happened there? And I think that's okay. Right. But being like,
did you ever think to get that fixed?
Yeah.
I'm like,
no, like, that is not there. Yeah.
I'm like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's fixable.
And it can be tough when we have like a medical professional say that, because I think I've had that too, where I've gone to like even like OBGYNs who have like uncomfortably said something or like touched it, right? And like I'm like, I'm not in a place where like I will give you that permission. And so I think like just because they're doctors means that they're also human. And so I've had to say like, hey, I wasn't comfortable with that, right? Or whatnot. But we have this like expectation, I think, that a medical professional is supposed to know how to handle those, but that's just not the case. It doesn't always happen that way, but it can make us feel really uncomfortable. So the best you can do is speak up about it, but also knowing that, I feel like I go into a situation like a doctor's appointment, sometimes with fear of having to have that conversation, just like I do with any other human out there in the world. Like I have to walk into this conversation knowing that they're probably going to ask. And sometimes I prefer to speak up first, just so that I get it out of the way so I can let them know how I feel, because it can be. And then there's days I don't want to talk about it. And then of course that's the day they say something that makes me uncomfortable.
I saw someone, I believe his name's Carson Tooler on Instagram, and he is a wheelchair user, and he was disabled, I'm pretty sure by a car accident. And I think a nurse asked him, quote, like, what happened to you? And he said, if it's not relevant to this appointment, I'm not going to share it. And I thought that was really powerful.
That is really powerful.
I love that.
Wow.
Yeah, we have a tool that I think, and really anyone in the world can use, called Rehearse Your Response. And, we train burn survivors specifically on, if you are getting stares or if someone's asking you questions and you're not in the mood to answer that day, and that's okay, of having that, 1 or 2 sentence line of, my burn injury happened 5 years ago. I'm doing okay now. Thanks for asking. That's all I care to discuss today. So, I think you can use those in person or on an app too. If you,
I would great. I would totally need that training, because I would probably be like, take a picture, it'll last longer. Stop staring.
Rude. And there is I feel like every person handles it differently, right? Like I may say something sarcastic because I'm just annoyed with you at that moment in time, but there are other folks that it's I'm not sure what to say, right? So smiling back or whatnot. So you guys remind me of my sister and I am more of Alexa's side of a little bit more aggressive with my responses. But not everyone is right, the us's of the world that are aggressive and will come out with something. But I think in that moment too, it's really hard, because in that moment I tend to become more like Jacqueline and be shy and not sure what to say, because you're just not prepared for it all the time. But
and then you're like, oh, I should have said this.
Yeah, right after you're like, oh, I definitely should have said the sarcastic thing that Alexa would have said. Yes.
It's also easier for me because it's not about me. Anytime I was out with Jacqueline and somebody would say something or give her grief about parking in the disabled parking, you're not attacking me. You're attacking my family, but then my protective side comes out. So at the end of the day, I'd say all these things. Maybe I would, but maybe I wouldn't, because it's why it's so different when it is about you as a person, instead of watching somebody go through it or just imagining. But I don't know. I'm sure I get the fights. I'm sure.
Yeah, my husband's like that too. I mean, in terms of if you make my husband mad because somebody said something to me, he's the one that. And in the case of the doctor that I just talked about, my husband was the one that called up the phone and told the doctor that was not okay, because I was too afraid to say something. So I think when it comes to a family member, you will speak up because, they're kind of afraid or embarrassed to do that for them. So
How did the doctor respond?
And admittedly, the doctor had said, yes, I recognize that she was uncomfortable in that moment. So yeah, and it did make me very uncomfortable. And like, I left the appointment in tears. So for my husband, right, as somebody, Alexa, who is caring for a loved one, like seeing that person upset because something happened that made you uncomfortable. So needless to say, I've learned my lesson and go into those appointments very like with a certain, objective in mind, knowing like this is a conversation that and sometimes the right doctor, right, knows how to handle that. So for me, it's been, okay, that's not a provider I want to associate myself with right now. And I'm not afraid to switch, but it does make me uncomfortable. So yeah, but knowing like my husband will stick up for me, like if I can't do it myself. And sometimes it's great to have that ally with you that is going to stick up for you regardless.
Yeah. And that's just such an important part of dealing with any sort of health issue or chronic illness, is just having that support system. And I'm going to have it in my sister and my other family members. And, eventually I'll find that in a partner. But yeah, it's really an important part.
It takes time. Yeah. It's definitely like finding the right person. And I luckily found mine before the accident, right? But I can imagine how much more challenging it can be to find someone who completely respects me, not just for right the inside, but the outside as well. And both of those components together can be difficult.
I think, for in your situation, because you met your husband before, you both had a different reality to adjust to and learn together. Whereas like for it's Jacqueline, she's been dealing with this for 15 years. So they're going to have like such a, quite the learning curve to catch up. Especially, but if they are disabled or chronically ill and they meet on Dateability, then they already have some of that knowledge and background and experience. Or if they're able-bodied but have been working with organizations and stuff like that.
Or even in your case, right, Alexa, if it's someone who has grown up with someone who's been in that situation, I think it's easier. I know, like, I understand things more on this end, having been through this experience, than someone maybe who hasn't, right? Or family members that haven't. So if you know someone, I think it makes it more relatable to understand what those people go through.
Yeah. And I think even if so you have burns, you can't relate to, you guys don't have the same diagnoses, but you can understand. And that's what's important. We don't believe that some person with one disability or chronic illness has to date somebody with the exact same diagnoses. Like that's
right.
So limiting. We're not trying to do that. But there's just this shared perspective and value that I think the people you were talking to in the mainstream dating apps, it is a learning curve that they clearly were not for, they're not going to catch up. They don't want to learn. They don't care. They can just swipe on to the next person who is quote unquote like easier and less of a burden. But on Dateability, they might have a completely different diagnosis than you, but they understand. And there's some like commonality there, which I think is important.
Yeah, I think there's some level of understanding to trauma, or not even trauma, like in your case, right? Like you may not have had a traumatic event, but you've been through, a lot of struggles that somebody who's never had to struggle before just doesn't have that understanding or really be able to comprehend that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I loved how even just we started the podcast today of, you shared about your dad, how he just woke up one day and this had happened to him. And if you think about the traditional wedding vows, you do say in sickness and in health, and, regardless if that's before, during, or after, these things do come up. And I think one of you mentioned that, it tells you a lot more about the other person than it does about yourself. And I think that's so important in dating, in friendships, just going down the street and, dealing with the public in general.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of stories on Twitter, mostly about people who are getting long COVID and their partners leave them after years together. And I mean, our parents are still married, 35 years almost? Something like crazy like that. And, no, my mom never predicted what would happen to my dad. Of course not. He couldn't predict it either. But they navigated that together. And, now Karen and Jacqueline was not sick when that happened. And so, in a way, it kind of set them up for a little bit of experience with you, and hunting for doctors and hunting for an answer. And yeah, I mean, I can't imagine that, but you really want someone, of course, like other things can come up. You really want to find someone who's not going to leave you just because you get sick, because it is very, unfortunately, that is like the future for most of us, whether it happens at 80 or it happens at 50 or 25. Eventually, something's going to happen.
And if it's not the case, like I know, my husband has stuck with me through it all, but not all survivors or, anyone have that same experience. But in that case, I say, like, you know what, if that person's not willing to stick with you through that, then was it really a relationship that you wanted to be in the beginning? So for me, it was like, I've grown stronger with my husband because I know that he's been through all of that with me. And I think you deserve, right, someone who's going to do that regardless, because you, like you said, you just never know when someone could wake up one day and have, another illness or something that they just came on overnight. So I think it's really important in that scenario to know, like, it's okay if I don't find the one right away, because they are out there, like you said, but it does take some time, and recognizing that if they weren't there for the right reasons, then it wasn't meant to be.
I know. I always want to comment, I'm so sorry to hear this, join Dateability. And I'm like, but maybe I should let this settle because I literally just got done. But I want to be like, they sucked. Like, it's fine. I'm here. But no, I agree with you. And, it could be not even help like an accident,
Right.
Right. The number of times I see people speeding down our street, and I think, like, what if I was crossing the street walking my dog? You just don't know. Like, it's so fragile and unpredictable. And it just, you want someone for the long haul, and good things come to those who wait. So, but it's worth it. That's awesome.
Well, I know we're coming up on time here, so I do want to save some time for our few last questions, but what's next for kind of Dateability, and what should we tell our listeners who are listening in today on to stay up to date on your app or the great things that are coming?
Yeah, so right now we're really just focusing on spreading the word and making sure that anyone who is looking for an app like this or who might want to know about it actually knows about it. So, most people know someone who's disabled or someone who has a chronic illness. So if they're single or they're looking for friends, just to help us spread the word. We're always posting on social media, on Instagram at Dateability app, and on Facebook. And we love feedback. We love to make the app the best place it can be. And so if you ever have any feedback, shoot us an email, a DM, and we always take everything very seriously.
And right now we're implementing a profile verification feature, which should be out in about 2 weeks. So that'll help. You'll know if the profile is verified, that they're not catfishing you. We think that's going to be really important and kind of give our users an additional sense of safety.
And the app itself, is there a cost to sign up, or is there a cost to use it? No, it's completely free.
Completely free.
That is absolutely wonderful.
I love that. Awesome. Well, we do always ask as our guests some final last questions, so I can ask mine first. So we typically ask, a lot of our guests are burn survivors, so we ask them about celebrating their burn anniversary. But I thought, a twist on that for the both of you would be, could you just share what your ideal date night would look like?
Ooh.
Oh gosh. I think I'm a lone wolf forever. Maybe it's ironic as the founder of the dating app. A date in like years.
Okay, that's not true. She caught in a lie.
What?
But I think my ideal date would be, a nice picnic in a park, like in like an urban area, so that like after when you get dinner, you can go get ice cream after. And I say that as
love a good ice cream.
Yes, I say that as someone eating too, but I still love food. And
I just have to go home right after.
Yeah, I love ice. So yeah, I think that would be my ideal date. And then if once we're actually dating, I'm a homebody for life. So a good movie, Netflix or reality TV, that's my deal.
You're in good company because Rachel and I are huge reality TV fans. So
that's what we live off of. Basically, it's embarrassing. I was actually going to make a miscongeniality joke that my ideal date's April 25th because it's not too hot and not too cold. But so pre-pandemic, I loved hockey, and I always wanted to find a guy who would take me to a hockey game, and we could eat a big pretzel.
Not too much to ask there.
My social life looks very different, but I do like the picnic idea because for a first date, because you got to talk to the person.
Yes.
Like I do love live music and concerts, but you cannot, like, I do not want to be speaking to you then. Like if you're talking at a concert, then I'm never going to see you again. But I think like that's concerts and sporting events would be fun for when you're dating. And a first date, like maybe I really like craft cocktails and like Prohibition era cocktails. So maybe like an outdoor patio with some good cocktails and olives.
Some string lights on the
patio. Yeah.
You guys are not only you're making me hungry as well. I'm hearing soft pretzels and ice cream. So those sound like my ideal dates, and I'm not dating. So, and I guess in terms of reality TV, do we have a favorite that we're currently watching or that we just finished watching?
Well, we're Bravo people. So,
okay.
You know,
do you guys watch Vanderpump Rules?
I don't really. I'm more of the summer house. So I live in Charleston, so I'm Southern charm, Southern hospitality. Yeah, I love all the trashy, dumb, drunk people on my screen.
I want to go to Charleston. It's on our list. The history there is incredible.
Well, Rachel will be there waiting for you when you come visit.
Let me know.
But no, what did we watched the Love is Blind reunion last night, and it was
such a bore. It was not worth it. I'm a huge Love is Blind fan, and I was like, what did I wait for?
No, and I didn't like the questioning. All the questioning about the babies at the it triggered me. Really triggered me. I did not appreciate it.
It was very uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, and you could tell that they were all uncomfortable with it. Like, no one wanted to answer.
Yeah. And it's 2023. We know we don't ask those questions anymore. Like,
no, I was like, Vanessa, stop it. Yeah.
We didn't have with Ortiz. Who's Burnett? Oh, that's the other guy from the first season. Yeah. Ortiz with this baby who we did not have with another Love is Blind contestant. So unclear. Like it's like being like, have one of these. I was like, oh, like let's not push this narrative. Like to each their own. But it was a big. Yeah, it was just.
And she brought it up like multiple times, which made me very uncomfortable as well. So yeah.
No, with all the Bravo. Yeah. We ditched The Bachelor.
Yes, fortunately.
We ditched.
Yeah, it's on its way out for sure. I still watch because I have to watch, but it's definitely on its way out.
Look, I was like, no, I don't want to watch this anymore. I don't like this platform. I don't like what they stand for. But we would get like sucked into it. But this time, Zach was so boring that Jacqueline finally was like, all right, we don't have to watch anymore. And I was like, we're done.
So you're looking for someone that likes to watch a ton of reality TV as well, is what we're hearing out of this.
Put up with it.
We watch like good TV too, though. Yes. We watched Yellow Jackets.
Yeah, Yellow Jackets,
Yellowstone.
Like we love it all. We love our TV.
Yeah,
so.
big TV.
Good TV. That's right.
Potato. That's perfect.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I do love to be a couch potato too, as well in the evenings, especially after you're working a long day. So it sounds like you could definitely use some reality binging. Well, our final question, I think I know the answer to some of this, is we always want to know what self-care looks like. We're big about self-care on this show. So what does self-care look like for the two of you?
Definitely TV. I love baths.
I love a good bath. Bath, is that what you said?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. I'm a queen of baths over here myself. So
and you know, I try to go on a long walk with my dog every day just to get out, get some fresh air. And yeah, just like being really kind to myself is important.
Yeah. TV. I started running during the pandemic, and so I try to run like almost every day. It's pretty meditative. I really like it. And because I work from home, I'm so confined to this space. Getting out and running around my neighborhood and getting out into the world is kind of breaks up the monotony. And I try to get 8 hours of sleep. every night. Try.
That's a big one. It's hard though, especially with all that reality TV, right?
Yeah, I'm
Goodness.
constantly waking up in the middle of the night, but I try. So that's really important to me.
So if you're listening to this, don't contact Dateability while they should be sleeping, or if a live reunion is supposed to be airing on Netflix.
I will, because I will answer.
Well, it's been such a pleasure having the two of you on this show. We will make sure we include all of the links we talked about today in our show notes. And any last final words for those listening out there, or advice for those that want to start dating on Dateability?
Yeah. Just take it one swipe at a time. You never know who you'll match with, and you just really never know what could come out of it. So, give it time and be courageous.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. It was a pleasure.
Yes.
We'll talk to you real soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Girls with Grafts. If you are enjoying this content, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.